Shalom to the elect of the nation of Israel. It's another edition of the Daily Edification, the Daily Exhortation, and it comes to you through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bar Shem Yahushai Bar Shem Rakakwadash. All praises and glory is due. Now I'm going to call this video, Be Concerned About the Purity of the Gospel. Be concerned about the purity of the gospel. And this is in response to all that's been going on, with this Chief Ephraim fiasco, the statement that he made about, our people should have common sense not to put a mark upon their skin, meaning not to take the chip. So, he feels he doesn't have to warn our people of not taking the chip, meaning going into the book of Revelation 13 and 16, which is definitely the mark of the beast, right? Which is this RFID chip, which on his part, Chief Ephraim, was a poor excuse. And this also shows me that he's not concerned with the purity of the gospel. Now, we as true teachers of Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, we should be most concerned with the purity of the gospel, meaning teaching the gospel the right way, the perfect way. As it is written, strive for the masteries. Part of the masteries is teaching the gospel the right way, the perfect way, speaking 100% truth. And that's the attitude we're supposed to have. That's why we here at Great Millstone, we always say we have 100% truth. Okay? And what prompted me to do this video was an example out of the book of Acts, the 18th chapter and the 24th verse. Okay, it starts there. It says this, and a certain Jew named Apollos, born at Alexandria. Alexandria was where? In Egypt. It was a main city in Egypt. It was named after who? Alexander the Creep. Okay, after Egypt was taken over by the Edomites. All right. So you had Israelites living in the city of Alexandria. Okay, as a matter of fact, you had a heavy population of Israelites living in that city. Jews in particular, which would be Israelites from the tribe of Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, right? So here's this certain Jew named Apollos, which Apollos is a Greek name. So what does that tell you? This was a Jew, this was an Israelite that spoke Greek. Okay, he would come under the title of Hellenistas. Okay, a Hellenistas, Israelite that spoke Greek. Okay, and that's why when you read the scriptures where it says there's no difference between the Jew and the Greek, what does that mean? That means you had Israelites that spoke Hebrew and you had Israelites that spoke Greek, that was raised up in the Greek customs, Greek fashion, but they were both Israelites. That is what is meant by there's no difference between them. Anyway, a certain Jew named Apollos, born at Alexandria, an eloquent man and mighty in the scriptures. So this dude was eloquent, which means when he spoke with a certain candor, he was eloquent and mighty in the scriptures. So he knew the scriptures. For him to be described as being mighty in the scriptures, that means he knew them scriptures. Okay? Which means let's break it down, which means he knew the writings of the prophets. Okay? Isaiah, Jeremiah, because that's what they had back then. They had the writings of the prophets. Obadiah, Ezekiel, Micah. Okay, so this man was mighty in the scriptures, right? Came to Ephesus. This man was instructed in the way of the Lord and being fervent in the spirit. So he had all the good qualities that a man of the Lord is supposed to have, right? But he still lacked something. Okay, let's find out what he lacked. This man was instructed in the way of the Lord, and being fervent in the spirit, he spake and taught diligently the things of the Lord, knowing only the baptism of John. Who is this John? John the Baptist, all right, who was sent to teach before Yahushua. As a matter of fact, this is the same John who baptized Yahushua. And John wanted Yahushua to baptize him, and Yahushua said, no, suffer it to be so, for we are men that fulfill prophecy. So John the Baptist ended up baptizing Yahushua. But the baptism of John wasn't as great as the baptism of Yahushua. Okay, Yahushua, now this is heavy. John physically baptized Israelites, but Yahushua spiritually baptized Israelites, beginning with his, his disciples, which became apostles. Okay, he baptized them with the Spirit, meaning he gave them 100% truth. Unlike John, John didn't have 100% truth, his baptism, but Yahushua's baptism, which was the Spirit, being which the word baptism means what? To be totally immersed, right? Now John's baptism was being totally immersed in water. Yahushua's baptism was being totally immersed in the Spirit. All right? Meaning having 100% truth. So this man, Apollos, only knew the baptism of John, meaning he didn't have the full truth of Yahushua. Right? Now let's read the next verse. And he began to speak boldly in the synagogue, this Apollos, right? Whom when Aquila and Priscilla, now Aquila and Priscilla, who are they? Well, they were friends, if you will. They were acquaintances of the Apostle Paul. Okay? Aquila and Priscilla. Right? They were acquaintances of the Apostle Paul. Right? Whom when Aquila and Priscilla had heard, let's read that again. Whom when Aquila and Priscilla had heard, they took him unto them, the him being Apollos, right? And expounded unto him the way of the Most High more perfectly. So the point is what? In relation to this lesson, the point is they were concerned, Aquila and Priscilla, who were acquaintances of the Apostle Paul, they were concerned with this man getting the purity of the gospel, this man being Apollos. Now they could have had an attitude like Chief Ephraim and said, well, it should be common sense for Apollos to know more perfectly the scriptures. It should be common sense. No, they didn't have that attitude. They heard the man speak, Apollos, and they said, you know what? We see he knows the basics, because that's what you got from John. You got the baptism of John was the basics. So they analyzed within themselves. They said, you know what? We see this guy has the basics. We know the full story. We know the perfect truth. So let's take him aside. All right? Let's take him aside and give him the perfect truth. Let's give him the purity of the gospel. Okay? The purity of the gospel. And what did that do for Apollos? Well, that made him even more perfect. And did not the Lord say that we are to be perfect? So Aquila and Priscilla, they wanted that man Apollos to be perfect in teaching the word, which he had all the good qualities to begin with. So now, by him receiving the full truth, now he was perfect. Okay? This man Apollos. Let's read the book of Matthew 5:48. It says, "Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect." And be ye therefore perfect, meaning concerning the gospel, for us to be perfect, brothers, we got to have the purity of the gospel. We got to have the pure truth, the 100% pure truth. And that takes us back to this chip, this Revelation 13 and 16. You can't half-ass it, man. You got to have the full truth, the purity of the gospel. Here's the word, Greek word for perfect. By the way, that's why we go into
Strong's G 5046. Teleos. Teleos.
That's why we go into the Hebrew, the Greek, and the Latin to attain what, brothers? To attain the purity of the gospel. And anybody that doesn't think like that, they're not a real workman of Yahweh Shem Yahushai. As it is written, study to show thyself approved, a real workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. Is that not written? So we're supposed to strive for the purity of the gospel. And as you see, as you look at the word, the Greek word for perfect, as you see the definition, it says, brought to his end, finished. So that's what happened with Apollos. Now that he knew the real truth, the 100% truth, well, he was finished, meaning in his perfection. Okay? He was a complete teacher now, because he knew, not only did he know the baptism of John, mighty in the scriptures, but now he would be mighty in the baptism of Yahweh Shai. He'd be able to go even deeper, okay? Bring out the purity of the gospel. Brought to its end, finish, wanting nothing. When you have the purity of the gospel, brothers, you don't want, you want for nothing, okay? Necessary to completeness. If you have the purity of the gospel, you're going to be complete. Perfect. That which is perfect. Okay? Consummate human integrity and virtue. Wait a minute. The statement that Chief Ephraim made was devoid of integrity and virtue. If you have integrity and virtue in this knowledge and this truth, you're not going to make a statement like that. You're not going to make a statement saying that it's common sense, how people are supposed to know. That's not a statement based upon integrity and virtue. You know, the way that we're supposed to think is to teach the purity of this gospel, and that's based upon integrity and virtue. Because we have integrity and virtue, we want you brothers to get the purity of the gospel. We want you to be perfect. We want you to be wanting nothing. We want you to be complete. Okay? Full-grown adult or full age mature. We want you to be mature. That statement that Chief Ephraim made, that wasn't a mature statement. But yet he's going to say to the brother from South Carolina, Elder Manat Zakbar, he's going to say, let us talk like men. Come on, man. Come on, dude. So that was my example, basically, of the purity of the gospel, okay? In the book of Acts 18 and 20, starting at the 24th verse. So to recap, this man Apollos, he came to Ephesus. He ran into acquaintances of the Apostle Paul, that being Aquila and Priscilla. When they heard him speak, they took him aside. They noticed that he only had the baptism of John, meaning he only had one level of understanding. So they took him aside and gave him a whole nother level of understanding based upon what they learned from the Apostle Paul. And by that man Apollos became perfect in preaching the gospel. He achieved the purity of the gospel. Okay, so with that said, hopefully you brothers were edified, and it's on to the next one.